So today is May 4th, and we took the area of polygons quiz last week, and all I put on there were a parallelogram and a trapezoid, the two polygons that you have the formula for on the reference sheet. I didn't put anything on there where you had to memorize the area formula. And as you can probably guess, if I'm already doing a review video, the grades have not been very good. I think I only had one. I've only graded one class, but I think there was only one 100. I expected quite a few 100s. And then there were a bunch of people that did not pass or barely passed. So since we only have 1 week left, I'm doing a review video earlier rather than later. And you guys have 5 days to make this up. The deadline for all makeups, retakes, everything is May 10th for quizzes. All right, so here's the different problems. They look very similar to this. First, I want to go over what a lot of people did, just visually in looking at the shapes. So we have a lot of dashed lines in here, and then a lot of solid lines. And I think people are getting confused as to what the actual measurements are they're going to use. Well, I know they are. I mean, people are using the wrong measurements in a lot of the formulas, just pulling the wrong numbers, basically. So when it comes to a base, because there's a base in every formula, there's a base, actually let's change pins. There's a base in this formula here, that B. There are two bases in this formula here. So you got to figure out what bases are we talking about? What is a base? Okay. We did these shapes before, so I didn't spend a lot of time in this particular lesson talking about what a base is, but I'm going to go back over it. So the figure itself is from the letters. Like I even in the problems, just to make sure, I named the trapezoids for you in the problem. So I didn't just give you a problem. I said parallelogram ABCD or trapezoid ABCD. I probably put that in the wrong order though. Technically, that's not right. So I'll fix that on the retake quiz. But it shouldn't matter. You should understand that the figure itself goes from one letter to the next letter. So if I want to say, where is the figure? A, B, C, D is the figure, the one with all the points. The points are the vertices. They're the corners, if you will, of the angles. The real word is vertex or vertice, but that's the figure. So all of these figures, all of these lines I'm drawing in, that's the shape itself. This one would be from A to B, E. So that's the shape. The dashed lines are drawn in because we need to solve for the height. And that's the reason it's drawn in every problem. Only reason to draw that in, the only reason to create a right triangle is so that we can solve for the height which we need in the formulas as well. There's a height there and there's a height there. And we need that to be able to solve for the area. That's the only reason those lines are drawn in. So when you're finding the base of the figure, or in some case, the bases, plural, for a trapezoid, you use the figure itself. Just look at the letters. Out. If you need to do what I just did, trace the figure from one letter to the next letter. One of those, or maybe two of those, traced lines will be the base. Or again, in the case of a trapezoid, you have two bases, but that 5 and that 17 are part of that base. It goes from C to D. So you have to use both of those numbers in that. In some of the other figures, you don't use both numbers. This 12 is one of the bases. 25 is one of the bases. 13 is not used. Over here, that 15, I was trying to figure out how to explain it. That 15 is the base. It goes from C to D. It is the side of the figure. That means it's the base. I don't subtract 4. I don't do anything. Now, if I just wanted to know just for the heck of it, what is the length of this section, then I would say, okay, well, I know the bottom base is 15. Since it's a parallelogram, which I tell you in the problem, it's a parallelogram, that would mean that would have to be 11, but I don't use the 11. I use the base. When I'm talking about using a base in a parallelogram, it is the entire side of the parallelogram. So up here, just to finish it off, the base up there would only be 12, not 12 plus 3. 3 is not part of the side of the figure. It's outside the figure. So again, we use a side of the figure as the base, sometimes two sides if it's a trapezoid. Sometimes we need to add two numbers together, like down here for the base. So that base would actually be 22 down there. Because again, from C to D is the side of the figure. That's the base. Again, just make sure you're finding the value or the length or whatever it is between one letter to the next letter. Don't go outside of the letters. Or if there's two numbers inside of the letters, you got to add them together. All right, so that was the first thing. A lot of mistakes on that. A lot of mistakes. All right, now when it comes to finding the values, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but here's the first mistake I saw. We need to use this right triangle. I drew in the dashed lines just to use it. I told you it's a right triangle. That's the only reason we draw in a vertical line would be to make a right triangle. So it's a right triangle. I gave you a value over here, and I don't think too many people made this mistake, but I didn't give you two values right where this green triangle is. You had to understand, okay, well, that means that side, line segment BD, is also 8. So now I have two of the three sides of that green right triangle. So I can use a squared, b squared, c squared. Now, quite a few, I don't know if I should say quite a few, too many people made this next mistake. So a squared, b squared, c squared is how I can solve this. I know two of the three sides. I have got to make sure I put side C in the correct position. That is side C. Like I said, quite a few people just made A 3 and then B 8 and then solve for C. That is not correct. 8 is side C. So it should have looked like this. I think most people got it right, but like I said, probably too many people did not get it right. That is the setup. So now you just do the math. There were some math mistakes for some people, so I think this is an easy retake to get a 100 on. Like, there's no reason you, especially with me doing this video now, you're basically looking at what the problems look like. So now I just say, all right, well, that's 64. That's 9. Well, 64 subtract 9. 55. Let's see, b squared. Oh, I'm gonna need a calculator for this. And maybe not. I'll ask Alexa. She's pretty good at math. Alexa, what is the square root of 55?
The square root of 55 is approximately 7.4162.
7.41. And I do want you to use four numbers after the decimal. Some of you rounded off really early, and it gave you a answer that I think on most tests would be marked incorrect. But they would also tell you where to round. So just use four numbers after the decimal until you get maybe the very end. But even then, just put four numbers just to be safe. All right, so that is B, so that's my height. So that's this side of the figure is the height. So now I have the base. Again, the base is from one letter to the other letter. So that is the base. Well, I see that's 12. I now have the height. So my area formula, which I gave you right on the quiz, area formula is 12 for the base times 7.4162. That's times 7.4162. And then whatever that equals would be your area. And show all of your work. All right, so I'm going to go through the other one a little quicker. This next trapezoid problem. But if you need to rewind, you can go back and rewind. So again, I gave you two of the three sides. This situation. I'm not saying it's going to look like this on the quiz, but just you can clearly see where your sides are. That would be side X or B or whatever you want to call it. Again, 10 is the hypotenuse. So A squared would be 5 squared, we'll say, plus B squared equals 10 is C. It's across from the right angle. I get 100 equals 25 plus B squared. Subtract 25, subtract 25. So B squared equals 75. And I take the square root of that. Square root of 75 would be just B. Alexa, what's the square root of 75?
The square root of 75 is approximately 8.6603.
So that is my height. That's what I just solved for when I solved for that side of the right triangle. Again, the right triangle was from, highlighted, A to C, C to that point. There's no variable there. And then that was the right triangle, and I just solved for the height. I'm going to get rid of, what should I get rid of? Actually, I may have to do it this way. Get rid of all of this stuff over here, since I'm going to need the height in my formula. All right, so next, I know the height. Now I can use my formula. Again, gave you that formula on the quiz. So I just need to say area equals 1/2 times the height, 8.6603. Now again, be careful when you do the bases. Just, I really want to make sure I show. Oh, actually, that worked easier than I thought. So the bases are from one letter to another letter. So A to B is a base. C to D is a base. All right, so I need to add some numbers together for this bottom base. It is not 17, it is 22. This base up here is just 9. So for my formula, I need to add 9 plus 20, I'm sorry, yeah, 22, because 22 is the other base. Not 17, not 5, 22. So now I've put it in. Some people are doing something weird in the calculators. So to be safe, if I were you guys, because I got some people that set it up right, but then they missed points because they just came up with the wrong number using the calculator somehow. Just add those two together first and get 31. Then just multiply everything together. 1/2 you could put as 0.5. If you do it as 1/2, it's the ABC button, 1 ABC 2, and then just times 8.6603 times 31. Just be careful about trying to put it all into the calculator at once. If you don't know how to use a calculator, that's not gonna work. All right, so there's your other answer. Now, again, these are a little trickier because they're trig, although a lot of people did better on the trig problems. A few, maybe not a lot. All right, so I have an angle. I only have one side of the figure. I cannot do A squared, B squared, C squared. So that's your hint that you need trig. I only have one side of that right triangle, and they gave me an angle, which they really probably wouldn't do unless I'm going to use that angle somehow. So I need to figure out what sides do I have, like opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse, relative to where the right angle is. I did not draw the right angle in on this particular problem, but it's right there. That's the only reason I would draw in dashed lines is to create that right angle. So if that's the right angle, I can immediately label this side the hypotenuse because across from, actually, I don't. So across from the right angle is the hypotenuse. I don't have anything there and I don't need to solve it. This is the side I need over here. I'm not really going to use the hypotenuse. This side, if this is the angle I'm using, this side is the opposite side. It's across from the 50-degree angle I'm using. Well, then that means this has to be the adjacent side. Or adjacent means next to. So it is next to that angle, right? It's part of that angle. So now that I've labeled them, I got to figure out which sides am I using? Well, I got a 4, so I'm definitely using the opposite side. I need x, so I'm definitely using the adjacent side. So which function uses that? Tangent. And it's always tangent of the angle that I'm going to use. Again, the angle has to be inside the right triangle, which 50 is. And the formula is opposite over adjacent. A few people wrote the wrong setup. They put x over 4 or whatever the numbers were on your version. It is opposite over adjacent, which if you label them correctly, should be pretty easy to set up. Now, when I did this, what was the tangent? 1.192. And then equals 4 over x. Some people didn't solve correctly, even though they set it up correctly. I'm going to show you, as I normally do, cross multiplying. I can make 1.192 into a fraction by just putting it over 1. Now I cross multiply and I get a 4 there. That will equal the other cross multiplying product, 1.192x. And to solve, I divide by 1.192 on both sides. So you get a value of 3 point something, I believe, 3.3557 for x. So that's your value of x, which is your height. That's your height for the formula. The formula is up above. It's area equals base times height. Now I just need to make sure I correctly find the base. Well, again, the base is between two letters. It's a side of the figure, so it's got to be between two letters. There's the base, so base times height. Oh, that's wrong. 3, let's just do this. Oh, right at the top of it. 3, 3, 5, 5, 7. If you multiply it out, that would be the area. All right. And last, this one was the one with the little trick in it. Again, we have a right triangle. We have drawn in these lines. The only reason we would do that would be so that we had a right triangle. That right triangle is not a part of the figure. I mean, one side is, I guess, from B to D, but this 13 won't be used when we figure out a base. It's not one of the sides of the figure. It is only used to solve for the height, which would be this over here. Now, I have to use an angle inside the figure. We never use the 90-degree angle. I don't remember seeing anybody do that, but in past quizzes, people did. I need to know either that angle or that angle. Well, if I know this is 50 down here, I should realize if this line, the height is perpendicular to the top base, it's got to be perpendicular to the bottom base. So that whole thing there is a right angle. That, let's just erase. This whole angle here is a right angle. Well, if I know part of it's 50, then the other part inside has to be 40. If you ever need to rewind, you can rewind. So that angle is 40 degrees in that right triangle. So that's the angle I'm going to use. Everything flows from the angle. Across from the angle is opposite. Across from the right angle is hypotenuse. And then the last remaining side has to be adjacent, which is the height, which is what I need. So using my trig, tangent of 40, opposite over adjacent. So 13 over, I'm going to still use x. A tangent of 40 was what, 0.8391. Tangent of 40 was 0.8391. Hope this all fits on the screen. So cross multiply this 0.8391 times x. equals 13 times 1. I'm not going to circle them. So last step, divide by 0.8391 on both sides. So we get that the height is what? 15.4928. Again, this is still the problem over on the right. I'm just going to move over here. That's my height. So now I just need to be careful about my formula. Area formula is 1/2. It's up above if you need to look again. 1/2 times the height. Well, just solve for the height. So height is 15.4928. And then base 1 plus base 2. So again, bases go from a letter to a letter. That's a base. From this letter to this letter. And this is actually pretty easy. There's only one number in both of them. So that base plus that base. And that's your formula. So add those together. Oops. 37 times the 15.4921. That's an arrow. We just bring these down. So 1/2 times, just gonna write it, I guess. 1/2 times the 15.4928, and then times the bases added together. Again, that's just the formula. And that'll give you your answer. All right, so everybody should be getting a 100 on that quiz. You know exactly what's on it. Those were the 4 problems, even with the trick in it. So there should be 0 surprises. So that's your year-end going away present, is an exact review of the same questions you did. And we'll see again if you come in and do a retake.